Hi, I'm Claire, and this is my reading wrap-up for January 2018. If you've been watching the channel recently, you'll have seen some wrap-ups that I did after I'd missed a few months and I was trying to catch up. And in those videos, the books weren't grouped by month in which I'd read them because, as I said, I was just trying to catch up. And honestly, I kind of missed the end of the month recap format, even though this is kind of like middle of the next month. All of this is to say we're back on the month-to-month reading wrap-up format for the foreseeable future. I have read 5 books in January. That's one less than I should be reading every month if I want to hit my yearly goal of reading 80 books, so I need to make sure I read a few more things in February. First up, I read The Society of Gentlemen by K.J. Charles. This is a male-male historical romance series, and the novels are called A Fashionable Indulgence, A Seditious Affair, and A Gentleman's Position. These books center around a group of wealthy, fashionable gentlemen, a society of gentlemen, if you will. They call themselves the Ricardians, and they are all united by the shared secret that they prefer the company of men. They use their combined influence and social capital as a group to keep the secret safe and to keep themselves safe. And then because these are romance novels, there are obviously people falling in love, loads of shenanigans, plenty of sexy times, some radical politics, and a murder conspiracy. Oh yeah, those novels have plenty of internal and external conflicts driving them, and they move at a pace. I went through these books really quickly, and by the time I was done, I needed more. I read the short stories that were available through KJ Charles' website, I found the archive of our own tag for the series, and I read through some of the fanfic for it. In short, I fell really hard for this series. One thing is for sure, I'm going to be reading more KJ Charles in the future. I'm also going to do a separate review video for the series because I've got a lot more things I want to discuss about these books. I feel like I've barely touched the surface here. I literally have several pages of notes on this. Another thing I wanted to quickly mention though is that I actually listened to most of this series on audio. I got all 3 novels through Audible's new Romance Lover package, which is a subscription tier where you can listen to basically as many romance novels as you want, not just one every month. I've been trying it out for the past few months, so if you'd be interested in a video where I talk about it in more detail and about my experience with it in more detail, then let me know in the comments below. Next up, I read Beneath the Sugar Sky by Shannon Maguire. This is the 3rd book in her Wayward Children novella series. This series is all about children and teenagers who have traveled to magical realms and fairylands only to be returned to the mundane world for one reason or another. These young people usually have a hard time going back to their previous lives, to being the children that their parents expect them to be, who they aren't anymore. The books center around Eleanor West's Home for Wayward Children, which is a boarding school where all of these children can go to learn to adapt to living in a world that doesn't believe that they've been to these extraordinary places and done these extraordinary things. In this 3rd book, we follow a new character called Cora. She has just returned from a world in which she was a mermaid, and she's a new student at the school, still trying to figure out her place there. When she meets Rini, a teenager who came from a nonsense world made of candy to ask for help. She literally falls from the sky. Rini is slowly disappearing out of existence because her mother Sumi, who was once a student at the school, died before Rini could be born. So of course, in order to save Rini from never having existed at all, Cora and a few of the other students have to go on a quest to figure out how to bring Sumi back to life. No big deal. I really enjoyed seeing the school again in the 3rd installment. I loved that within this one novella we got to see both the school and some of the different worlds that the protagonist traveled to. In the 1st book, we remain at the school throughout. The different worlds that the characters have visited previously remain a really strong presence because they're so important to these characters. But they are stuck in the school, and this longing that they can't go back to these worlds is really palpable within that 1st book. The 2nd book is a prequel, and it focuses very sharply on 2 of the characters from the 1st book. It stays with them from before they're born through their childhood and to them finding their magical door and living in the otherworldly realm of the moor. But we don't get to see the school in that book. We don't get to see those characters grappling with what they've lost in returning to the mundane world, because it's all a prequel. So in this third book, we get to see some characters who have come back from magical worlds and who really miss those worlds, and they have to travel to other magical worlds to fulfill this quest and try to save this girl, but they're not the right magical worlds for those characters. They don't fit in those worlds. One of my favorite things about the first book in the series was the concept of all these different magical worlds that kind of fit on a map, where the cardinal points, instead of being north and south, are things like high logical and high nonsense. And that concept is being explored in this book, insofar as you get to see that it's not just any old magical world that'll do, it's worlds that specifically fit each single characters and they're not interchangeable. Just before I sat down to record this video, I saw an announcement on Tor.com's website about new books in the Wayward Children series. I will leave a link to that article in the description box below. The next book in the series is going to be called In an Absent Dream, and it's going to be about Lundy, who was something of an antagonist in the first book, so that's quite intriguing. And best of all, Tor.com announced that they signed Sean Maguire for 4 more stories after that in the Wayward Children series. So there are going to be 9 stories minimum in that series, which is super exciting to me. I'm so happy. And finally, in January, I found my newest obsession, the delightful webcomic Check Please by Ngozi Ukazu. I had heard of Check Please before. I knew it was about hockey. I knew there was a dedicated fandom behind it, but I didn't know a whole lot more. I only read this a few weeks ago, about mid-January, but I've been basking in the fandom ever since then, which you may have noticed since I mentioned this in several videos and on the podcast already, and it's only been a few weeks. Check Please follows Eric Bittle, a former figure skater turned ice hockey player who loves to bake and vlogs about his culinary experiments. The comic opens with Eric moving into his college dorm at Samuel University, where he's gone on a hockey scholarship. He meets the Samuel's men's hockey team and gets on well with most of the team, and bakes up a storm in their frat house kitchen. But there is a bit of a problem. Eric is a really fast skater, but all his previous experience is from a no check allowed co-ed team, and in the Samuels team there is checking, which is like a hockey term for tackling, I guess. It's basically when a player barrels into another to steal the puck from them. It looks pretty violent, even in cartoon form, and our poor Eric can't really deal with it. He's so frightened of checking that it's affecting his game, and it's also not gaining him any favors with Jack, the extremely handsome, extremely brooding, extremely Canadian captain of the team. If you're like me and you know nothing about hockey, don't worry. It's really not necessary to be a hockey expert to enjoy this comic. A lot of the terminology is explained within a narrative, either with panels of Eric recording his vlog and explaining the hockey terminology to his subscribers, who are mostly there for his baking, or with little extra comics dedicated to explaining a particular concept. And while there is certainly a lot of hockey in this comic, there's also a large amount of baking, lots of house parties, and general college slice of life stuff like finishing essays at 3 AM the day before they're due, and all that good stuff. There's a lot about Eric struggling to come out as gay to his teammates, and especially to his family back in Georgia. Eric obviously does end up making friends with Captain Handsome Brooding Jack, who is, as it turns out, not just a hockey robot, but a ridiculous, adorable hockey robot who doesn't really know how to deal with his feelings. There is so much more that I love about this comic. All of the secondary characters are really great, the art is super cute, I could go on and on and on. Instead, I'm just going to put a link to the Check Please website in the description box. If my fanish ramblings about this comic have piqued your interest, you can read all of the current available comic for free on that website. The comic is still ongoing, but when it's finished, it will cover all 4 years of Eric's college career. Right now only years 1 through 3 are out, and year 4 should start to come out in March of this year, so I am so excited for that. So that's it, those were the things that I read in January of 2018. Plus a whole heap of Check Please fanfiction. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you've read any of these or if you have any recommendations for me based on the things that I talked about in this video, please do let me know in the comments below. If you'd like to see more from me, you can check out a previous video right about here. And if you haven't yet, please hit the subscribe button that's on my face right here for new videos from me every week. I've been Claire, thanks so much for watching, and see you soon. I can't say hockey, it's really hard to talk about this comic without saying hockey!